Okay, thanks everyone for joining us. This is our third last industry talk. We've got a couple more coming up next week, which I'll talk a little bit about soon. But for now, I want to introduce our guest for today. His name is Jim Lounsbury. He's joining us from Sydney. Jim is an accomplished and prolific writer, director, storyteller, a bit of a jack or a Jim, if you like, of all trades, and managing director of Cubic Content. He's worked around the world on a huge array of material from corporate film to documentary, short drama, to his feature film Love Is Now. And one of his latest projects, The Meaning of Vanlife, a documentary, is now streaming on Stan as an exclusive property. So welcome, Jim. Thanks so much for making the time today, mate.
Oh, thanks, Dan. Always for you. Dan and I have a. So we've survived a film production together. So usually, if you come out of those alive, you cling to those people.
We'll get to that later if we have time.
Yeah.
So I guess my first question to you, which is something that, even though, like you say, we've known each other for a little while, but how did you get started in film and media?
Um, I always, if I dial back the story, and I'll try to keep it brief. When I signed up for classes at university, I remember my father's a doctor and my mother's a nurse, and the plan was that I was going to get a science degree. And so we driven to the university. We got into the actual hall, which they'd set up with all the different disciplines and all the different you know uh, subjects. And I looked at the science people on the other side of the room, and I was like, I just didn't feel like I belonged over there. It was a really weird feeling, it was this gut feeling. And I looked over to the left, and there's the humanities, and I was like, I think, this is to my mother who went with me. I said, I think I'm going to sign up to do an English degree or something in journalism or something. And she said, what? That's not the plan. And it was just a gut feeling. And I ended up going back over and signing up for a science degree. But then the entire time in university, I ended up with a minor in the arts. I did photography, I did literature, I studied journalism, I studied writing, and with every spare moment, I was doing everything but my core Bachelor of Science, which was eventually supposed to become pre-med, because that's what the preordained plan was. And then when I finished my university degree, I took a gap year because I didn't want to go to med school. I didn't want to go on in science, and I took a trip to Australia. It was a I worked with a private school to set up a theater company, and I just kind of started meeting filmmakers and meeting artists. And my journey to Australia was sort of this awakening of that artistic and creative side. So I never formally trained as a filmmaker, but I just started working, I guess, writing plays, working on documentary projects. I finally I shot a little documentary with a Newcastle-based filmmaker, Carl Brandstater, and he kind of taught me a lot of what I know about documentary, and then just studied a lot of, my library, which, I've got books around me here, books on directing, Judith Weston, Michael Robinger, uh, a lot of these authors became my companions, and that's how I learned, just by reading and then, doing it on the job.
Yeah, great. So, I mean, like, I know that you are a multi-skilled sort of creative person, but I think for at least for today's talk, we'll talk a little bit about writing, but primarily about directing. So, I
Mm.
guess you mentioned that you sort of pick things up on the job and you read a lot, but is there anything in particular that drew you to directing?
I think directing, I just really loved the process of being involved with something all the way through. I never felt like a producer. For me, a director is someone who's immersed in a project, who can't shake it out of their bones, who lives and breathes and sleeps and dreams about projects. And I think that's always been the way that I've approached something. If I have a story, I get obsessive about it. I write about it, but I might also take photographs, or I might look at art books and think about that project through the prism of that particular medium. And so because of that obsessive nature, which, just part of my personality, I suppose, I felt like I was just a director. I felt like I was someone who liked to be involved in all aspects. And so from the very beginning, I kind of set out to learn all aspects of the production process so that I could, you know, articulate a vision to anyone, whether that was the audio department, or whether it was someone in the art department, or whether that was a producer. So I learned about budget, everything from budgets to, wardrobe and texture, to art influences and music. So these are all things that I kind of started to, learn about. But I think that is just, I think it should be a natural extension of who you are. And not every director is the same. Some directors focus on performance. Some directors are more technical. I'm probably more technical by nature, as in I came from photography. So I do have a stronger grasp of photography, lensing, cinematography. But I've tried to immerse myself in other things and push myself out of my comfort zone with each project.
Yeah, I mean, just as well for anyone who's watching, if you have any questions for Jim, drop them in the chat box. We'll get to them. As with all of these so far, I've got a list of things to go through, but then we'll get to your questions. So please make sure that you're dropping them in there. So what does a director do?
Well, apart from obsess about story, I guess if I look at it as a greater function, if you think about what a director is supposed to do as a greater function in society, I suppose the responsibility and the utility that I have as an artist and a creative is to help us process the world around us, to help us process our lives. So a director, as a storyteller, is about getting the best work out of everyone else, because essentially it's like captaining a ship, or managing a very large project. You've got a myriad of different people involved in different disciplines with very different specialties, but your role is really to carry the vision, to be the custodian of that vision, and to make sure that it stays intact, from the beginning to the end. And I remember a quote Paul Thomas Anderson said when he directed Hustler, and I always loved PTA and loved his films. He was sort of my generation. I was in my 20s when I was kind of, listening to some of his, watching some of his films and whatnot. And I remember a quote that he said. He said, "I realized, what was it? Was it Studio 54? Is that his?"
Yeah,
I'm trying
Boogie
to think of
Nights, wasn't it?
Boogie Nights. Boogie Nights. Sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one I was thinking of. Thank you. You're the one with the encyclopedic memory, mate. I'll have to lean on that. But I do. Paul Thomas Anderson once had a quote about Boogie Nights. He said, "I realized how early you have to fight." He goes, at the end of Boogie Nights, I didn't realize that I started fighting too late. And I think that always resonated with me. That notion that you have to start fighting from the very moment you start. You decide to make something into a film, or even before that, you have to fight for the style of film you want to make, the tone, so a director's job is to fight for that vision, or in a friendlier way to be the custodian of that vision, and to get everyone on the same page.
Yeah, cool. I mean, and I guess that changes. Maybe that doesn't change when it's your own vision. So, the next question I have is a little bit about writing, directing,
Mm.
which is what you did obviously for your film Love Is Now. Like, you wrote the script and sort of shepherded it through production as well as directing. But presumably you've had input into other scripts that you've ended up directing as well. So what's the relationship for you between, the written word and then what ends up on the screen?
It's a strange one, because I think when you write something, you visualize your film, and unless you're making Sleepy Hollow, where everything's built in a studio and you can actually bring that vision to fruition in exact detail, there's always compromise and change along the way. There's that old adage that you write a film 3 times. When you write it, when you film it, and then when you edit it together in post. And so I guess when you're writing it, you're falling in love with the character, you're visualizing the journey, And then when you start to go into location scouting and actually going out to film what you've written, you have to put on a different hat. At least in my case, I always had to do that. I had to almost divorce myself from the script and start looking at it as a director, which meant that I was now trying to get rid of all the words that I'd written because, show don't tell. You want to be able to show visually. And often the writer tends to use word and lean on words as a crutch, whereas the director has to lean on the image and lean on, visual tension and color and, that visual palette as your language. So it's an interesting thing. You have to almost, you have this sort of, I don't know, this split personality where you're fighting against yourself on it. Um, and I guess it can be tricky. It's tough to cut your own work because you fall in love with certain things, and and that becomes really difficult because the things you fall in love with can often be the things that can hinder a project. And if you were directing someone else's work, you would unceremoniously cut the dead wood off. But with yourself, those are my words. I wrote those, so you have to almost divorce yourself from it.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into the next question, which was about, directing the words of other people. I think there's a certain there are wonderful challenges, but also opportunities when you're not married to the words that you've slaved over and that you've sort of worked on for a long time. So can you tell us a little bit about some of your experiences working with other people's scripts? Like
Yeah,
how do you start approaching something that isn't yours?
I mean, it's kind of refreshing. To be honest, I would love, as a director, I would love people to go. I'm not in that position where people call me and just go, "Hey, I've got the script. You need to direct this." Yes, I have worked on Lockie Leonard and directed an episode of the children's show there. Yes, I've directed a few short films that friends have written and brought to me and said, "Hey, we'd love you to direct this." But for the most part, my pathway has been the independent filmmaker, where I slave over something for 3-4 years writing it, or maybe it might be a year or something writing it, and then another 3-4 years trying to actualize and get people to believe in that vision. Um, but probably the best example would be a script, Early Checkout, which I directed. It was written by Clark Richards and Dustin Clare, and they starred in it. It was these two sort of, bumbling mates who find themselves in a hotel room with a dead body. Um, which it was a funny little script, black comedy. They brought it to me, and I was like, "This is great." And I remember thinking, as a director, this is fantastic to be able to approach this and direct something for the first time without having written it, and so I could really be ruthless about, the approach, but yet within the context of being respectful of their work. So it was a whole new journey for me to be able to communicate with the writers, ask them for changes, look at how we might be able to economize certain elements of the storytelling. And to be frank, I really enjoyed it. But one of the things that I wish I put my writer's hat back on, because the ending of the film was always a little clunky, and I wasn't quite sure. I mean, it did quite well. Like, won, best film at New England Film Festival, played at Rochester, and won Independent Spirit Award, and played at Palm Springs, and a few different great film festivals, and got a good response. But I always felt like the end was just a little bit hokey. It didn't quite land. And I said, after we'd finished the film, I said, we should have just done it this way, to Dustin and Clark. And they went, "Oh my God, why didn't you tell us that? Like, that would have been amazing, an amazing end, And I realized that I hadn't put my writer's hat on. I was actually purely invested as a director and trying to make their script work and the best way possible. And then realized, oh shit, I should have really thought from a narrative perspective about how it could have been better as well, and use that use let the writer out of his box that I'd locked him in, for the project.
Yeah. So I just want to pick up on something that you talked a little bit about there, which I think is another really important role for a director, and it's a role that I've seen you do a few times, which is the director will sometimes be wheeled out by producers to sell a story, and to sort of encapsulate and embody and get people excited. You use the word actualize, which is a really good one, in terms of actualizing projects. What is some of your experiences in terms of what do producers or distributors or places like Stan, for instance, what do they care about? What don't they care about? What questions do they ask when you've got a project that you're trying to get up?
Um, I guess it's all about, from my standpoint, I think every person approaches things differently in terms of how they communicate as a communicator and a storyteller. I'm, I'm American. I grew up in the, suburban American sprawl, and, you know, um, I grew up in the pop culture. I mean, I grew up with Spielberg and George Lucas, and I mean, these were the guys that I watched. It took me a while to actually find more obscure filmmakers because in the cineplexes, that's all they played is the blockbusters. So, um, but I guess my approach has always been enthusiasm. This idea that I have to bring a level of enthusiasm and get people excited about a story. And what is it that's going to get them excited about a story? Um, so just as a filmmaker, you're thinking about that person in the 13th row or the 22nd row in the cinema, and you're thinking, what's that experience going to be like for them? How do I thrill them? How do I excite them? How do I give them something unexpected? By the same token, when you've got an audience of producers, what is it that they want? What are they looking for to excite them? And often it's completely different, you know? So yes, you're right. Sometimes you do get wheeled out, but I guess the idea is initially with an idea is actually to sell the producers and the money people and the distributors and everyone on the idea, and that there's a combination of ways to do that. Whether you've got really good cast, or whether the story is just so incredibly compelling that it's something that has to be told, or whether you've already got the money, so for them it's a lot. For them it's an easy sell. I mean, Stan, just to give you a quick example on the Meaning of Vanlife, they were excited by the fact that I had partnered with a social media, a group of, this group called Van Life Diaries that had a social media footprint of over 500,000 followers on Instagram, and they had 30,000 Facebook followers, and there was a proven audience there, and we had raised 60,000, or what I think it was 53,000 US dollars, which at the time was over 60,000 Australian dollars from that market. So Stan looks at it and goes, well, there's clearly a market for it. So they were excited by the fact that there were a lot of people who'd be interested in learning more about van builds and van life and what it's like to live on the road in a van. And for them, it was a low risk investment. To be honest, they paid, jack all for it. So for them, it was like, well, okay, yeah, we'll pay you for 5 years. We'll buy it for 5 years for exclusive. But what that did do for me is it enabled us to then go get Screen Australia incentives through the program, which they've set up for independent filmmakers, which is fantastic, the Producers Equity Program. And then it enabled me to get a little bit more funding as a pre-sale from a distributor and a few other things to cobble together enough budget to make it. But I know I'm going all over the place here because it's a big question. It's a loaded question. And a lot of filmmakers sit in that position where they're at the brink. How do I get, I've got this project that's amazing. How do I get people excited about it? How to get in front of the right people? And I guess the real answer is it kind of depends, but you have to find a way to get people excited. I remember even early on with Draftin', which is a film that I was attached to direct. It never got up, but one of the things we did is I went to a bookbinder and actually put an entire, I put art references and photographs from other films and almost made a book. And I had a bookbinder bind a book. I wanted it to be solid. I wanted someone to think. I wanted to give someone a pitch that they wouldn't put in the trash can. And so I was like, I'm going to make this book in like 50, 60 odd pages. It had director's notes, producer's notes. Rosemary Blight was attached to produce at the time. The writer's notes. We went and shot a trailer for the film on Super 16, film at the time. And they got this book. And inside was a DVD back in the days of DVD. They had a little DVD sleeve with the actual trailer we'd shot, and there was this book, and I was like, try throwing that away, motherfucker. Sorry, pardon my French, but I was like, I didn't want people to throw it away. And we ended up getting funding to develop it through Screen Australia. And, it went a long way down the track. Had some investors who were interested based on the book. I think committed about $250,000, and then like a lot of these projects, it got to a certain point, it just fell over, and it didn't get legs. But but I think that's the real trick, is how do you just want to make sure that people can't say no for whatever reason. Sometimes you just have to badger them.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess the next question I've had, and there's a few questions dropping into the chat box. Please do drop questions in. But it's sort of about short films. Um, you have made short films, and you've had some success with short films.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm interested in what changed in moving to Love Is Now, to your feature, which I know is in development for some time. I think you had the script for that when we first met back in the day.
Yeah.
So, what was the biggest difference in being that same figure? So the director being this shepherd for the project, this custodian of the story or whatever it is. Was there any difference in moving to a feature length?
Um, to be honest, we asked for a lot more help than we got with Love Is Now. We went to Screen Australia, we went to Screen New South Wales, we tried to get some money out of Screen West at one point and shoot it out there. Everyone knocked us back. We didn't get any screen development money. We didn't get any support until we had raised about $700,000 from independent investors. At that point, Screen Australia was like, "Oh, okay," and they gave us some regional film fund money and a few other little bits and pieces to put our budget together. So I felt like we were out on I wanted more support. I wanted someone to sort of help with the crafting of that story. I wanted good ones on it because I felt a little bit out on an island. It was my first film, and I really wanted to put it under pressure and crystallize it and everything else. So I felt a little bit ill-equipped when I went into that project. To be honest, I felt quite vulnerable because I was both an executive producer on the project, had helped raise the money, had pitched it in the room, and had helped put all the pitches together. They got a little bit of support from Nikon, who gave us kind of money because we were using Nikon cameras in the film, and I just I don't know. It was one of those. It was a whirlwind, that project. It was a whirlwind because you push it uphill for 3-4 years, and then all of a sudden, when we got the momentum and we got some of the private, financing and Nikon on board, then it just happened very quick. And in the space of 6 months, the film was done. Like, it was just done. So the transition, I think the one thing that I look back on, I go, we kind of had with Love Is Now, we had the expectation of a commercial release because Nikon wanted a specific release date. So we had December 4 as a release date, and we were still trying to tie up the final pieces of contracting and finance in February, March, and I remember we had a meeting. It must have been April of 2014, and it was like this. It was like in the film, you write your midpoint of a film, and the midpoint is a point of no return, right? Where the hero is confronted with a decision, and they go one way or they go the other, and either one is going. Their life is going to be, like they're just held to that decision because they're committed, and that was a decision. Are we going to make this film with Nikon's support, or are we going to, and we have to deliver it on December 4, or are we going to decide not to make this film? And do it a different way, which we might be able to keep some of those investors, but the film might fall over and it might take us another 6 months or a year to get everything else together. And we kind of went, well, I guess we'll just hit that deadline. And so there was that line in the sand, and that was the point of no return. And we just had to it was just an engine that just started going at that point. So we had all the commercial expectations without all the commercial benefits, as in we couldn't just throw money at things. So yeah, it was a very tight post timeline. I would have liked to have more post-production time as an artist and as a filmmaker to actually craft the story. But that being said, every project comes with its own compromises. So
Right.
yeah, and for me that was one. It was time. Like with short films, I often took time. Like they would take me 9 months to finish because I would just edit and I would look at them and I would come back at them and I would sleep and I would have that chance to digest and then look at it with fresh eyes. Whereas this film, it was just like 4 months of just bang, 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 6 day weeks,
You almost,
to the content.
you almost think the opposite would be true, right? That you'd have more time with a longer film, but in your
Well, that
case,
was the dream. That was the
yeah,
dream. I mean, you read stories about Apocalypse Now, where for Coppola, like directs Apocalypse Now, he comes back, he edits edits the whole film, and then like now he didn't like that editor, scraps it, and it takes him how long? You probably know the story better than me, but it took him like 3 years to bring
like
the film out.
years, a million
Years,
feet of film. Yeah,
a million feet of film, and it took him years to find the actual film and all that, right? And as a filmmaker, you go, that to me in a way that's a dream. And I always thought of like the classic the, oh come on, Badlands, Thin Red Line, um,
oh, Malik.
Malik. So Malik always, he set out to make a masterpiece every time. Like he sets out to make a
Yeah,
masterpiece because he realizes, that he's an artist. He realized once he puts that canvas up on the wall for someone to look at, like you don't go back from that. You then have to move on, and that's that period. But like, are you going to do it well, right, or not? And so for me, that's how I always view film. It's like film is forever. It's a piece of me. It's something that I'm putting out there as an expression. So for me, it was very confronting to not have the time to continue working on it, making it better. And it's hard to watch that film knowing how much you can make it better. And and that's always a struggle, and I think all filmmakers feel it. Orson Welles said, film's never finished, abandoned,
yeah.
because you never feel like you're going to be done, because you can always see ways to improve or tweak or make it better.
So you've mentioned Wells, Malik, um, Coppola, and Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we've got some students here who are doing cinema studies at the moment.
Mm.
Who are the apart from those guys, or maybe tell us why you admire those directors. Is there who are the directors? What do you watch for in terms of direction when you're watching a film?
Well, uh, look, like I said, I grew up on Spielberg and Lucas, and and Lucas as a pure storyteller. Like I just loved his story, the sort of the adventurous storytelling format, that he's taken, and some of his early stuff, like American Graffiti, was amazing. Like I thought it was quite a good film, and captured an era. Um, Spielberg, I really admire his geography, like his ability to kind of, and because I'm such a visual, like camera guy, you know, I just love the way that Spielberg always lets you know exactly where you are. Like you always understand where you are in the geography of the film. Like you're never confused, which is a little bit to his detriment too. Like I think it's not as surprising as it could be, or as revealing. So yeah, Malik I've always loved because of um, I guess he's just got a soulful and sort of philosophical sense to all his films. There's sort of a deeper layer, which I've always identified with. I've been an outdoorsman and a naturalist my whole life as well. I go to the mountains as my retreat. So, you know, there's a similar, I guess, Midwestern American kind of country boy thing that I connect with Malik through. Um, and his films are intensely visual. I wish I kind of that's the film I want to make now. I want to do something in the outdoors, using nature and the outdoors as a metaphor for what's going on inside the characters a little bit more than I have in the past. And it's something that Malik did has done really well. Badlands and Thin Red Line in particular, those things uh, were amazing that way. um, Days of Heaven too, like shooting an entire film at golden hour. Like what a luxury, what an amazing thing. Like on IMAX on
I'm
70
sure his
millimeter.
producers hated him for that.
Yeah, but like I got this job. I got this job last year. I was doing an ad for HP, and we didn't have much budget. And I said to them, okay, I had a really small crew. I was like, we're going to have a small crew. We're not going to get gaffers or anything else. We'll strip the gaffing budget out of this. And they're like, what? I was like, and we're going to spend 4 days in the country. And they're like, 4 days? I was like, yeah, because we're going to shoot sunsets and sunrises, and then we're going to take siestas during the day. I'll cook everyone lunch. So I got this little ranch, and we took our crew out there. It was like, 4 crew and, a couple actors that were in this thing. And I was just like, we're just going to use, Dennis Hopper. What did he say? He said, God is a good gaffer, So we just went out and we just shot the light that was there, and we just used golden hour. We shot between the hours of, I think it was during summertime. So we shot between the hours about, 6 and, 8:30.
Yeah.
At night, and similar times in the morning, and then the rest of the day we were putting down rushes and logging everything, and having siesta. So we did that for 4 or 5 days, and came home, and it looked really fantastic. Like, it looked like a much bigger production because of it.
Yeah.
So
a couple more questions. The difference between directing documentary and drama. So, what are some of the challenges or opportunities when, obviously, what are the differences?
Well, to be honest, I don't know that I'm a great documentary director yet. I mean, I've been watching a few amazing documentaries and just going, wow, like, just the ability to be immediate, to be there with a character in a very difficult position, high stakes environments, and to be able to keep the camera rolling. With van life, the meaning of van life, I felt like I started to get there in moments. There were moments where I felt like, and I think with documentary, it's about just getting it, just capturing it. I remember one scene, and this is probably, this is starkly different to film, because film, you're trying to create the urgency and energy. Documentary, you have to capture it or it's gone. You can't recreate it. I mean, you can, people do, and there are ways, where people recreate and reenact things. But for me, the documentaries that probably impact me the most, you think of like Cartel Land, or you think of like, some of these, Sea of Shadows I saw recently, and they're just so, I mean, Sea of Shadows is probably a little more structured, but like, you're there, how do these people get this stuff? How are they, rolling on the camera when a drug deal's going down and someone's got a gun out? You're like, how do they keep that presence of mind and they keep it going? That to me is quite powerful. But like, there was this one moment in the Meaning of Vanlife, and not as high stakes as Cartel Land, of course, but we're out in the middle of Wyoming, and I was following these couple down the, we had a drone up, and I was shooting them going into this little patch of, aspens. They're like an American tree that grows near waterways, and they've got white trunks and, bright green foliage, and they're driving into this little road into the aspens. It was this beautiful drone shot. And then I saw they went into the trees, and then all of a sudden on the drone, I could see a little puff of smoke come out the back of the van. And then they kind of stopped out the other side of the aspens. And I just had that feeling. I was like, there's something going down. I don't know what's going on down with the van, or something's broken down. And I landed the drone straight away where it was in the middle of the road, because it was a remote road. So I didn't worry that cars or anything. I landed the drone, grabbed my camera, and I ran down the road. And as I was running down the road, a piece of the block had broken off. Like, they gotten high centered on something. It had broken off a piece of the block, and it was lying in the middle of the road with a trail of oil. And I just kept running. And all this footage, by the way, is in 50 frames per second, because I had been shooting something else in 50 frames per second, and I didn't even have the time and didn't even think, and I had to speed it up in post. But anyway, so I was shot this entire sequence in 50 frames per second, and I went to the van as they were coming back and discovering that part of their block had fallen out of the car. And then they were going through all those iterations that you go through of like, we're in the middle of Wyoming. How are we going to fix this? We're lost out behind all these, and you're in the middle of watching them go through that moment. And it's the best moment in the entire film, because it's actually documentary. You're actually there watching people go through something we've all kind of been through, or at least, have worried about. What if I broke down here? And you're there and you're watching them go through it. And then they go through all the stages of grief. They're like, no, it's not happening. We'll just fix it. It'll be fine. We'll just weld it back together. It's like, no, it's cast iron. So they're going through all that, and then they start to go through the acceptance of like, oh man, this is bad. And then all of a sudden they start blaming each other. You were driving really fast, and all of a sudden you're seeing them go through all that stuff, and you're like, that's fun. Like, that's actually documentary. And I think for me, that's it. That's the biggest lesson is, you've got to put yourself in a position and get in that habit of just getting it while it's happening, and and becoming that fly on the wall, and getting people to accept the fact that you're just going to be there, and you're just going to float, you're going to be a shadow for a while. And that's,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's a big
Cool.
lesson.
So probably the key question out of all of these talks that we've done so far is like, if a student wanted to do what you do, if you want to sort of become a director, what sort of things should they be doing, working on? What should they be learning? Is being a director something you can plan for, or sort of get yourself in a decent position for?
To be honest, I mean, I think there's more opportunities than there ever been in terms of channels for you to get work out there. I was talking to a director from North Carolina recently, David Hambridge, because a project that I'm looking to work on at the moment is about the southern white rhino and how it's nearing extinction. And I'm dealing with a veterinary scientist out there who's pioneering a new way to do IVF on these rhinos and all this kind of stuff. And I got in touch with David Hambridge because David Hambridge did a film called Kafaru, which is about the last northern white rhino who died last year. His name was Sudan. He was the last male. I think there's still a couple females left, but it was the last male in the species. Like, it was literally there during the death of a species. And I think when and he had no money. The guy, I mean, he did a Kickstarter and raised maybe 15,000 US dollars or something, and it was just a huge lesson. He just grabbed a C3, he had a C300. He flew out to Africa, and he made it over 6 years. Like, because he realized this is a big story. So he knew that Sudan was getting older. He knew that that this was going to be a major global story about the death of a species, for one of the few times we've actually gotten to witness the death of a species. And so he just got to know all the game boards looking after this animal, and he started filming it in little spot fire sessions. And he only had enough money to do 2 or 3 trips, and then he was just living on the bones of his ass, and met people and tried to, pitched it to them, and got enough money to get another flight out to shoot more stuff, and finally got out there when Sudan was finally euthanized and killed, and he was there, and he knew all the players. And I just go, right now, and particularly in documentary, just make it, just make it. Like, if you find a story, start shooting it, just start making it. And there's no excuses now, because you can get yourself an A7S, you can get yourself a really good, camera, like very cheap. And so it's really, there's no excuse. For $3,000, $5,000, you can have a full edit suite and camera and access to everything you need to make an award-winning documentary. So I guess that's the lesson now, is just get out and make stuff. And drama's the same way. I mean, it doesn't have, something honest, can cut through. You've seen it in so many ways, so many different films, that, just getting out there and shooting something honest and something real can cut through. So you don't need big budgets to do it. I often felt like Love Is Now would have been better had I shot it on $200,000 and not had all the pressure of distribution and Screen Australia and the producer's offset and right.
Yeah.
I've often felt like that. I once wrote a paper. I actually wrote, you can probably search this up somewhere. I once wrote a paper. It was a white paper, and it was supposed to be my own philosophy. And it said how the strangulation of independent budgets creates orgasmic returns in the film industry. And it was literally an evaluation of all these different films that had made on low budgets, and how that empowered them to be better. So I looked at like Swingers, and I looked at Clerks, and I looked at what's the Rebel Without a Rodriguez's
El
El
Mariachi.
Mariachi.
Yeah.
And I said, how strangulation in independent film can create orgasmic returns. I think that's the name of the title of it. And it was really just me going, I wanted to create a treatise to free myself from the expectation that I had to have a big budget to make film, but that I could go out and just make one. And I had to get myself out of it. It's almost like the Dogma guys. I just went, I've got to create a little treatise for myself, that it's like It's like you have to have a different relationship with it. You go, no, this is an expensive medium. This is the medium that is how I define it. And I define it that it's going to be better if I have less budget. And so I've always kind of
Yeah.
believed that. I've always believed that ingenuity and creativity comes from struggle. So if I'm having a hard time on set, or I can't get something, or the light's not right, or something's not working, I'm going, wow, this is going to be really good. I just got to figure out how. Because
Mm.
I identify the struggle and not throwing money at it as as an opportunity. And I think you have
Yeah.
to think of it that way.
Yeah. And I mean, look, as we've said in a couple of these talks, I mean, students in this program are in a really privileged position in that you've got, and like I say, not now, but like once all this is over and we're back on campus, I mean, you've got access to gear. You have no excuse not to be making stuff, not just for your subjects, but for yourselves and to build up that reel. So just get out there and do it.
And to be honest, I'm not disparaging the school and those opportunities at all, because I actually think that when I look at filmmakers who've really made it and have done well, it often comes from those core groups that they met at university and school, and they go off and they make things together. At the highest level, these people like the George Lucas and Steven Spielbergs, they met pre-film school. Like they
Mm.
they they've known each other. You forget that they were just students who just helping each other make their films when it all started. So I think that's you meet really interesting, like-minded people there, and it's such a great
Yeah.
way to build that crew, because you need that crew.
Okay, let's get to some of these questions. So Patrick's got a few in there. He's asked, is the directing of shorts that are accepted by festivals or winning awards, is that still relevant? Is that still a key stepping stone for emerging filmmakers?
Um, Absolutely. I absolutely think it is. I mean, there's certain people who will tell you, obviously YouTube and going down that path of like creating a channel or creating content that's got a huge following can also be a pathway now. When you look at Screen Australia, I mean, just look at Screen Australia. I mean, if you're going to go to pathway, certainly having a short film that's played Berlin or has won Palm Beach, or has, you know, has won some awards, certainly lowers the barrier threshold. I'll just put it that way. I think if you've got a really amazing project, um, you may find the support regardless. You find a unique way to pitch it in, or get people excited about it. You might get, but like even myself, I would feel like if I'd had a film play Sundance, or if I had a film play Berlin, or win Palme d'Or or something like that, like you you would life would be a lot easier in terms of getting my films up and getting people to take notice of the films that I've got. Plus, if you play one of those festivals, you can often get yourself an agent, which can get you opportunities in other areas like TV, or other ways to learn your craft and develop your craft and meet great creatives. So yes, absolutely, making shorts and doing that and getting into film festivals. Plus, film festivals, you realize film festivals not even so much about the award of the film festival. Is that I've met a huge amount of collaborators in film festivals. I've met distributors in film festivals, people who have opened doorways and helped me sell a documentary in America, or raise money for Love Is Now. So film festivals are where other like-minded people come together too. So for me, they've been essential, because I didn't have the film crew that I developed through university. I had to meet film people in other ways. So industry events and film festivals became a way to meet them. And having a film there, it's one thing. I went to Sundance once when I didn't have a film or anything, and I was like, I'm never again. I'm not going to go to a film festival just to go. I want to actually go with a film. So to me, because when you go, then all of a sudden people come see it. You go see there. It becomes like it's a thing, and you don't just, you seem like just a suit walking around trying to absorb I don't know, absorb the bright lights. You're actually an artist. You're there because you deserve to be there, and people come to see your work. So I like going to a film festival with a film. It's really
Hmm,
great.
cool. So Jonah's asked a really interesting question. How do you make sure that your story and voice remains interesting and unique throughout the film? And how do you stop yourself from falling into cliches?
Um, I don't know. That's a tough one because I've always felt like, I'm an American. I have a little bit of an earnest voice, and as a human being, as it is, and so I'm always fighting that earnest side of myself. And I feel like Love Is Now, for instance, it's a bit sappy. People in Australia sort of think it's not really too, it's not as gritty and kind of like in your face. However, you go out to Middle America and it played so well at festivals in
Yeah, right.
America. It just played so well. Like like Iowa, Atlanta, Maine, Portland, like just the reactions and people, sort of crying and the response and everything. Arizona, like I just like I won 5 or 6 awards in these little festivals, like Best Picture in Maine and like Best Foreign Film at Arizona and stuff. And I realized that that voice, my voice, is one that kind of has a little bit of that's my that's those are my people. That's where I grew up. Um, so I I don't know. Like I think it is hard sometimes to just hold on to your own compass. Yes, because and those creatives that you surround yourself with are really important because every now and then you need people around you telling you you're not crazy and telling you, yeah, they believe in I believe in your vision. I came on because I believed in your vision, and so stick to it. Like, we wouldn't respect you as much if you didn't stick to it. So I think it's really important to define what kind of film you want to make and to be really um, uh, I'll tell you one thing because I'm trying to answer your question. This idea of how do you make sure something isn't cliche. You have to bounce things off people. Like you have to use people around you too, because sometimes you get caught in an echo chamber or a vacuum of your own sort of idea, and you need people to read the script to give you feedback, and people that you trust, so other artists that you like, whether it's an actor friend who has read a lot of scripts and they come back to you and go, actually this feels a bit feels a bit tired to me. Dustin Clare has been a really good bouncing board for me. I've shared everything with him. And he's a real no bullshit guy. He grew up in Ballina. He's like, he's just he's not a sentimental dude. So it's really important to have those sort of voices that you trust kind of tell you, no, you're on a good thing here, or you're not. Um, and then you can choose whether you follow that or not. But I think it's good to have those extra voices and to figure out whether something you're telling is fresh, because it's
Hmm.
important to be surprising and fresh for people.
Hmm. Um, how do you go about, that's an interesting one, an interesting flipped question. How do you go about approaching writers whose work you'd like to develop into a film?
Flattery. I saw something you wrote. It really moved me. How can we work together? I
Yeah.
don't know. Take them out for coffee. I mean, there's one girl, Rose Traylor, who wrote a couple of shorts. I help with Actors Center Australia, sometimes doing some of their show reels, and I do an acting for screen course with them. And Rose was one of their young writers that Adam Cook, who's their head of drama, sort of said, "Oh, you got to, I think she's going to write a few of the showreel pieces. You mind giving her some thoughts and ideas?" And she gave me the script, and I was like, "I don't have any thoughts or ideas." She's like 10 times better writer than me. She's amazing. Like so, so I was like, so I really kind of encouraged her. I was like, I really love your stuff. Like I really love your
Mm.
writing. And she's obviously a young writer, so was looking for opportunities. So that's not a hard sell necessarily. But like if you're going for if you're thinking, oh, I want to get an author on board or a another screenwriter, well-known screenwriter. Um, I think first just being a fan, having watched and read a lot of their stuff, um,
Mm.
and articulating what you like about it and how you'd love to work on something, or if you have something that's interesting, I have this story that'd be amazing. I think your voice would be perfect for it. Is there any way,
Mm.
I'd love to find a way for us to work together. I think
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, writers God, if directors don't get a call asking people to, to sort of direct films, I mean, writers, come on, like, how often does someone, contact a writer? And not all writers will write other people's stuff, that
Yeah.
might not be their thing, but yeah, I mean, it's, I think a lot of writers are just, they dream of that, someone calling them up
Mm.
to ask them to write a film.
Cool. Another good one from Jonah. What are some of the biggest mistakes you've made? What did you wish you understood about directing before you started shooting?
That's a good one. Mistakes. I think, I think, I talked about that line in the sand moment with Love Is Now, and I go back and forth about that a lot.
Hmm.
I feel like that decision, that point of no return, where we decided to make the film with Nikon versus not, I feel like I would have made a better film if we hadn't had done it with Nikon. But then when I think about that, and so I think I look back and we're all driven by fears. I think often our mistakes are driven by fears, um, because we're afraid or we're afraid for this. And at that particular moment, my fear was I wouldn't get a film up if I didn't use that opportunity that was in front of me.
Yeah.
And but yet my gut was kind of telling me, just like my gut way back in college was telling me that I should go to the humanities table. My gut was kind of telling me that the film wouldn't. I don't know if that would be the right environment to make a film, with that sort of commercial baggage hanging around an independent film.
Mm.
So that's probably a mistake I feel like I may have made. I mean, I I don't know. It's tough being a filmmaker. Keeping a roof over your head. I've got two kids. Um, I didn't come from an independently wealthy family. I don't have a trust fund or anything. So like keeping the rent paid while making film, it just means that those things need to matter. They need to count.
Hmm.
Your decisions. You don't get to make many films in life. At the best of times. So you need to make sure that those are, the ones that you are making are ones that you identify with and that you feel you can add a unique perspective to. So yeah, I don't know. You know, that's probably my advice is just, make sure that your films are what you want to do and be comfortable saying no if something's not right for you.
So filmmakers are often asked, why are you the best person to tell this story? How do you position yourself to be the best person to tell whatever story you want to tell? It's a good question.
It is a good question. And that's frustrated me sometimes because sometimes they'll come across an amazing story. Um, I once pitched a documentary about a basketball tournament. I'm a basketball fanatic. I love basketball, but about a basketball tournament run in the Northern Territory. And I really wanted to do this documentary and had a lot of support from a lot of corners, and even had indigenous producers and everything else. But in the end, Screen Oz and some of those people are just like, well, it's not really your story to tell, and that really frustrated me. And I'm like, and no one's ever done the story. They've never done it.
Mm.
King of the Kimberley is this basketball tournament that gets run up in the Kimberley, and no one's ever done it. And I go, well, that story's never been told. Like and obviously I'm someone who identified. I was like, maybe sometimes the way you tell a story is you spin the globe and you throw a dart, and the person that it hits should tell that
Mm.
story. I don't know, like, because I'm a displaced person. I grew displaced. That's probably the wrong way to put it. It makes it seem like I'm a refugee. I'm not. But I am an immigrant to Australia. I am someone who's a citizen of the world. So for me, I've kind of just gone, well, if you're the person who's passionate, it shouldn't be the person that's most passionate about the story tell the story as opposed to the person whose story is to tell. I don't know. It's a tough one. I think being the most educated and the most informed person in the room at all times about that story helps. I think being the person who understands it through and through and understands it has a real, like, I always connect stories to myself and to my own experience. Um, Call it the method actor, the method, uh, the method version of film directing. But like, if I'm telling a story about extinction, I think about those times when I was a kid going out, collecting fossils, and I connect it to this notion of wondering what these creatures are like, and my fascination with science. I draw things back to my science degree, even though I sort of loathe it at times. I don't know. I think you have to own it personally. You have to own a story, at least for me as a director. You have to own why it connects to you at a deep level. And and help articulate that to others so they can see, wow, this means a lot to this person. And it might not be from their corner of the universe, but I can see why they probably care about this more than anyone else.
Final question that we're sort of asking everyone is that we can't really ignore everything that's going on at the moment. So how are you spending your time at the moment? How are you managing to stay creative and push through?
Well, I saw this New Yorker cartoon a while back. I think I shared it with you, Dan, over our phone call. But there's this New Yorker cartoon where, there's this guy rowing a boat, and he's got like a fishing pole sticking out the side, and there's like a ship sinking in the background. There's rain coming down. There's like sharks in the water. There's debris from like, structures that have been demolished. And it says, "Great time to finish your novel." I don't think creativity necessarily thrives. Yes, deadlines can be helpful for creativity at times, but I don't know that creativity exists in the same place as fight or flight. I think creativity comes from a place of kind of, calm, awe, inspiration, wonder, all those sort of things. So the first 4 weeks of like the whole coronavirus thing, I was a mess. I couldn't find any creative flow because I was just so obsessed. It was like reading too much news, too much social media, trying to work out how to keep the kids educated at home, all that kind of stuff. I was just too busy with all that. But I think since we sort of settled into this, everyone says the new normal. I mean, the human body, it takes about 6 weeks to change your habits, right? Any habit. So I think after 4 to 6 weeks, everyone started to settle in and go, okay, I think I can, we can work with this. I can figure this out. And all the adrenal glands settled down and everything. I just turned my attention to the things I could do. So screenwriting, research. I fortunately had a health documentary that I'd gotten a little bit of funding for. So I was back and forth on Zoom with a doctor of lifestyle medicine that I'm working on with that, writing all the scripts for that, doing all that research. I dug up an old podcast project that I've been working on and started pitching that around because I was like, well, I can do podcasts, something we can do in an isolated environment, and how long are we going to be here? And so I just started thinking that way. Just started thinking, what are the things I can do, and focus on those, which is similar to those barriers I told you about. It's no different than being an independent film and not being able to get a helicopter shot. How do you get the same feeling? There's got to be some way to get the same feeling. Strap a GoPro to a bird or something. But like, how do you get the same feeling? And I think just like that, you go, okay, how do I tell stories? It's more important now than ever to tell stories while we're all locked down. How do we tell them? I think we just have to find a different way of doing it. We've done it throughout the ages. We now tell stories really well on YouTube. We wouldn't have done that before. We tell stories, through our Instagram feeds, and we tell stories through all sorts of different mediums now that we wouldn't have, podcasts and everything else that we wouldn't have done before. So I think creativity thrives on chaos a little bit. Once you get past, like I said, the fight or flight, once you weren't kind of worried about just keeping food on the table and keeping everyone from getting sick or whatever. But yeah, so I've just been turning my attention to things I can do, and now I've got a couple little things that I'm able to shoot. So I've got this architecture series that I'm working on with Dustin Clare, that mate of mine who is a distributor now, and he distributes a lot of factual content. So I'm actually working with him on a architecture series, which is a very low impact shoot. So I can go out to a piece of unique architecture and do an interview with the architect and shoot the actual building. And there's only like 2 or 3 of us there, and we just keep the crew very small, and it kind of works within the guidelines. So I've now started to get out and do a little bit more of that sort of work, which is exciting.
Great. All right. Well, we're well and truly out of time. I think I mentioned to you we'd have no trouble, you and I, filling an hour. Thank you to everyone that dropped by, and thank you to everyone that asked questions. But most of all, thank you, Jim, for your time. And we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, guys. All the
Yeah,
best with your films, and Dan can put you in touch with me if you ever have any other questions. I'm more than happy to to answer them, via email or something like that. So,
cool.
all right,
Thanks, Jim.
all
Thanks,
right,
everyone.
you bet. All right, take care.